So instead of asking what your favorite fungo is, and it's kind of been a trend this year in this season, but what's your favorite machine you're using for whatever it is?
Man, I love the mini hack, man. I love the mini hack still. Like that's my favorite. I mean, when CJ and I worked at Biola, we made a deal with Jugs and had the MP this is a J. I'm trying to think what the name of it was. The 3 where it's like, see, you know what I'm talking about? Like the automatic, like you could just move the clicker and it would go to like whatever pitch you wanted.
Yep.
Like that was pretty sweet. But like my last spring there, I got a mini hack again, and I was like, yeah, the mini hack is my favorite. That's my favorite.
Yeah, I actually gotta roll the same one just because you can do so much with it. I love the ability to throw the dimple balls in there, have players hit those light flights that are still a little bit denser than your traditional light flight ball. And they're able to hit that thing without blowing their hands up and work on some pitches that maybe they're like a little more insecure on prior to. So that mini hack is just versatile.
You're such a hitting coach. Like it's unbelievable. Like I don't like, yeah, you make me sound like an idiot in regards to like, hey, like I like this machine. Let me give you an exact breakdown of why I like this machine. All right, like whatever, dude.
No, I think we got the junior a couple of years ago, and that thing's been through the ringer. Knobs coming off, the wheels are kind of wobbly, but it shoots like a champ. That thing's a hero, hitting infield, outfield, all those things. So yeah, maybe a new sponsor down the line. You know, we got to get down on the old Hack Attack.
If you're listening from Hack Attack, it is eric@bigcountrymedia.com. Email me, and we will get the sponsorship lined up.
Throwback.
Of course, for vision training, the Max BP is
for everybody.
superior machine. Max BP.
The throwback here is I said the last time I was on this podcast when we said favorite fungo that I was open for fungo sponsorships and never received a fungo sponsorship. So I'm going to also jcalhoun13@gmail.com. Would be great to send a link, Hack Attack, based out of Nevada. Just
maybe you need to make a recruiting video, Jeff, just like the kids do, with your fungo skills.
Hashtag.
Just break your fungo on the first swing, and then don't you hate it when that happens? Poor quality fungos. Me too.
CJ can attest to this. I have broken one fungo in my career, and it was an electric sight to see, though. I'll tell you that.
Snapped it.
Oh man! That poor fungo didn't deserve it. But yeah, mini hack attack.
Okay, well, I mean, the main reason why we got you guys back on here, back on track. Talk about your new gigs. I mean, we have a couple new exciting, elevations for both of you, leaving the Division I baseball ranks into professional baseball, which is awesome to see. I think there's been so many of the Northwest guys that have started from the college end and ended up in the pro ranks, and you guys are the new crop of youngins to get there. So talk about your gigs, what you're excited for. We don't have to get into why you did it, but talk about why you're excited for the future and your new roles.
I can start on that. I think I'm most excited about the ability to just get back on the field. I was in a non-traditional coaching role, right, with Stanford for the last couple of years, which was awesome. I mean, I have really nothing bad to say at all about where I came from, anything. It was a great learning experience for me. And, the job I had held prior, working with Jeff, actually was, we had talked about it. I was like, I just feel I'm kind of like in a stagnant place where I'm teaching the same things. I'm saying the same stuff, and recruiting with him was one of the things that kept the job really fresh. And, when the opportunity came up, it was like, he called me and was like, hey man, I'll level with you. If I was in your shoes, I would have been gone yesterday. And I was like, all right, cool. And so I went there, learned a ton from some of the greatest coaches in the country. Obviously they've been to the World Series 3 times in a row. And, it was an unbelievable experience, but I was kind of at a point where I was like, okay, I need to take what I've learned here, and I need to continue to get back on a path where I'm back on the field in a more traditional role And I want to see what the pro ball side of things is like. And I've got a really good friend in the organization with Tyler Smarslak, who is an infield coach at the AAA level. And he said, like, hey, you can either not do this thing and always wonder if professional baseball was for you, or you can give it a try and find out one way or another whether it was for you. And that was kind of the breaking point for me, where I was like, all right, I would love to put on a big league uniform in spring training and just kind of live out that childhood dream a little bit. Part of me is that. And then the other part is like, it's still coaching younger players and developing, and it's like the true definition of development. So I'm really excited to get going on that aspect of things, because development's been such a big passion of mine for a long time. And I just can't wait to get going on it.
Yeah, I can confirm that conversation did happen with me and CJ right around Christmas time, 2021. Like at my parents' house, I was sitting there like, yeah, you should, like, if the roles were flipped, like I would do that. And then I hung up the phone. I was like, crap, I got to find a new assistant coach. And so, like, I think kind of similar to CJ, being in the third assistant role, obviously I was on the field and able to coach and recruit, which is something I was really passionate about. The idea that for me got really exciting was the opportunity to get really diving into the data side of things, and being with the Houston Astros, the data information that they're able to gather is really just on a really high level, even compared to, like, for us as a data school at Campbell, just a lot of information, a lot of like really good ability to understand, like, reading data and understand like what the development plan is with that, but also bringing the coach's eye to that. I'm like, okay, like I see this, how does what I see correlate to the data in like regards to reaction times and things like that from a position player? And so for me, like kind of similar to CJ, had a guy in the organization reach out that I knew, who's the infield coordinator, and Mike Ramazzotti. And Mike reached out and we talked about the job and the opportunity. And for me, it was just kind of similar to CJ. It was like, I'm still working with 18 and 22-year-olds on a daily basis, still just really trying to understand, like, how do I develop these guys to be the best player they could be, and understand that their goal as players is to be in the big leagues versus college. Like, their goal is to get to professional baseball and to win. So now it's like, hey, we're in the business of winning and getting to the next level. And so, like, I was talking about it with my new manager who I'm working with. I was like, hey man, like, my goal is to work with these guys for as few a days total as possible, because that means they moved on to the next level. And that's the objective, is like get them out of here as fast as we can, which means we're getting them better, which means they're ready to go to the next level. And kind of similar to CJ, another coach in the organization with the Astros that I was good friends with, Nate Shaver, who's the high manager, he and I talked when they called about the job, and he was like, hey man, what's your 5-year plan? Like, what do you think? And I've always thought 5-year plans were shenanigans anyway, and pretty just like, you don't know, man. Like, I've said it on this podcast, I think the first time, I was like, man, like, my 5-year goal when I was a volunteer at UC San Diego was to have insurance in 5 years. And in less than 5 years, I was a head coach at Biola. And that was when I got insurance. And I was like, well, that's like, I didn't think I was going to be a head coach, but I achieved my 5-year goal, which, again, I think it's really easy to get caught up in like what your long-term goal is. But if you're just really dove into like what my short-term success and short-term ability to do my job at a really high level is, that's when like doors will open. And that's what this created. And, for us, like the Astros had a need for a guy who is a catching background, who, I think for me it was a little different because I've been a manager in the college level. I've been an offensive guy at the college level, and I've also been a defensive guy in the catching world for the 10 years I've done this. And so for them, they kind of got a jack of all trades in regards to what they got. So they were really excited about it. And like kind of similar to CJ, just I'm excited. Our player development meetings were a couple weeks ago, and that was something that was really eye-opening. I learned a ton, and being around all the coordinators and being around all the other coaches, like, I think what really excites me about the Astros is that it's a younger group as a whole in regards to managers, assistant coaches, coordinators. Everybody, I would say, in the room is mostly under 45, except for a couple guys. So I think for us, it's like it's a really fun energy to go to work with every day. And even now, it's like while we're crunching goals and trying to create information on guys, it's like, man, this is fun. Like, this is something that we don't get to be around the guys yet, but when we get to be around the guys in spring training, it's like, okay, I know who this guy is because I've seen his film for 3 hours, and I know like how I can work with this guy and what I think I can do to help his success. So I think the fun thing about being a minor league guy, and I'll let CJ talk about this, is like I think, you know, the idea of being more behind the scenes of their success versus, you know, when they get there, they're not like, if they get to the major leagues, like they're not sitting there going like, man, like the guy in low A that helped me is the reason for my success. It's like, no, like we were just a part of their progression for them to become a big leaguer. And that for me is a lot more fun. And I think about that when being as a college coach and being at the low level for a long time and then transitioning to Division I, it was like, man, like I was a small part of guys having success at the NAI level to D2 to then Division I. Like it's just like being a part of their progression of their development and seeing them have successes. I get more excitement out of them having success than, you know, me, you know, as a head coach getting to 50 wins. Like okay, great, I got to 50 wins, but like seeing them have success, it's like being able to text them like, hey, like we had a guy at Biola that we coached that combined to throw a no-hitter his first year in pro ball, and it's like, hey man, like congratulations, like what a cool deal, like how awesome is that? Like being a part of their journey is a lot of fun, and that's where I feel like I still get to do that in pro ball just like I did in college. So, and CJ did it. CJ transitioned to pro ball, so I followed him. I was like, you know, kind of the ongoing joke that Kelly has made before too is like,
No.
Like CJ went Division I went
Coach
Division
Koppel
I.
started this. It wasn't me.
Like CJ became a pro coach, I became a pro coach. Like if CJ becomes an astronaut, I'll become an astronaut. It's not a big deal. So it's like we'll just transition our way.
I think I added the astronaut in there, but you are an Astro, so maybe
I've got my application into NASA.
Well, mine's in with the bobsledding team, so it's like it's kind of similar to being in a spaceship. It's fine. Like it's a little torpedo.
So what are meetings like so far? You guys have, you know, Jeff, you had yours in person. I'm not sure if CJ, you met with anyone yet, but I'm sure you have Zooms and stuff on the daily. But what has kind of been the vibe you've gotten? I mean, Jeff talked about the data end of things, but what are the communications like? What's different on a daily basis? Like what kind of gets you excited? What maybe what gets you nervous, you know, about, you know, being around some of these guys and, you know, different backgrounds and all those things? Like what's kind of your guys' feelings right now towards all this?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the biggest thing I was just most excited about was just meeting everybody and like getting in the room with everybody and trying to understand personalities and be able to read body language and stuff like that in regards to our organizational meetings and, you know, being able to have our general manager, our owner, our assistant GMs in the room, just being able to meet them, get to know them, like even as an assistant coach at a low level affiliate, it was like, okay, like there's a name to there's a face to a title, and it's like, hey, like this is the general manager, this is actually who Dana is, versus like, okay, like the GM's coming to town, okay, like which one's the GM? And then from a data side of things, I think just again, like being able to see like how far we could dive into and information of like what makes them successful. And okay, like watching guys, like, so for me as a catching person by trade and by background, it's like, okay, like I can watch guys on film and I'm listening to our field coordinator and catching coordinator, Michael Thomas, talk about catchers. And it's like, okay, like I could see in my head, like with this guy right off the bat in spring training, like this is something I'd like to dive into. And like, I want to watch more video and potentially dive into like how I can make this guy better. And, you know, how, like, what do I think are cues or verbal like cues, or what can I put them into a drill setting that'll allow them to have success? And, you know, I think that's where the biggest challenge has been, I think for me, like, you know, for us as an organization, like our low A team traditionally is more like Latin heavy. So just really for me, the last, like, I would say, I mean, I took this job less than a month ago. So for me, like the last few weeks have been really just heavy learning Spanish terms, learning Spanish, just phrases, learning just different things to allow them to understand cues. And I think just show respect out of my end of like trying to speak their language versus them hearing me being like, hey, like work under the ball. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, hey, work under the ball. And they're like, okay. And it's like, okay, like, no. Like, and it's like, now I can actually understand like how to explain that in Spanish versus just yelling at them in English and having them not understand it and not be able to. I think that's the biggest challenge that I've been working through here that I'm excited to do. And my boss as a manager for us in Fayetteville is bilingual. So I told him when I met him at our meetings, I was like, hey man, like I want to learn it. Like I want to get better at it. Like, don't be afraid to speak to me in Spanish and for me to look at you and be like, como se dice, and like try to figure out what you're saying. So I think that's something that I'm really excited about, is just being able to continue to, again, like broaden my ability to communicate with players almost worldwide then in regards to like how to grow our game.
And so from the way that we did things from an onboarding standpoint, the Twins, I go through this like week and a half hiring process where every day I'm talking with a different person, every single day, talking with a different person, climbing up the ladder a little bit. And then I do like a panel. Went well. I accepted the job, and they're like, great, we're going to fly you out for a hitting camp in November. It's going to be a week-long deal in Florida. And I was unbelievably excited. And then I get on the airplane and I start flying out there, and I'm like, holy smokes, I'm nervous. And it's crazy. Like I think the last time I was nervous was, I mean, maybe the first time in Omaha when we went out there, and it's 30,000 people and you don't realize what that's like until you're there. And it was that same kind of feeling of like uncertainty and just maybe a feeling of, oh man, did I make a huge mistake? Is this going to be something that I'm well received in? Whatever. So we get on the plane. I lay over in Dallas. I get on another plane with a couple guys that I start to recognize. There's one of the Twins first rounders is there that I had coached against. And there's a couple more guys. And then we land in Florida, we get in this van and they start talking. And I'm like, why was I nervous? Like these guys are just baseball players across the board. It's the same guys that I've been around in the high school players when I go back home and I try and help out some of my hometown high school guys on Whidbey Island. And it's the same talk and speak as the college guys here. And, I think there's a lot of value in the time I've spent with players like Tommy Troy, who was a first rounder, and the amount of draft picks that have gotten here. And so I started listening to these guys talk, and I was like, man, I don't know why I was nervous. Baseball is baseball across the board. Baseball players are baseball players across the board. So we go into this hitting camp for a week-long deal, and I start learning about the way that they approach the swing and everything is awesome, because now it's things that I've seen with my eyes before and haven't really figured out how to articulate what I'm seeing. Like we can all do it, right? You're like, oh, your barrel's dumping early, but what's the cause of this? Or your hands are rushing out front. Okay, what does this really tell us that we're doing? And so I start to learn a little bit more about sequencing. And throughout that week, I get just unbelievably excited. And at one point I told our hitting coordinator, I was like, hey, I'm going to be honest, like there's a little bit of a part of me that's like, man, am I unprepared for this? Am I not qualified for this? And that's the first time in my career that I've been like, as a hitting coach, there's some doubt in there. And he goes, no, like this is the way that everybody comes in the first time. Like you're just learning new verbiage, right? Like it's the same stuff that you've been talking about, but it's just a different way of talking about it. And you're able to now like kind of quantify things with the numbers that we have. And you're able to have just this unbelievable access to video and data to kind of break things down and then back up the things that you've been seeing. And so it went from this point of like nervousness and just unsure about whether I was making a bad decision to excitement about learning new things and kind of being able to apply that to a craft that I've taken a lot of pride in over the last, X amount of years since starting to coach. So it was cool. And then since then it's been every week we have a Zoom, and then they kind of break down like a little part of advanced reports, and then we put it into practice. And then the following week, they'll kind of give you like a pitcher or two. You practice giving an advanced report on that pitcher to the rest of the members of the Zoom as if they were the hitters in the, in your meeting. And it's cool. It's very similar to what we would do at the college level, right? And of what this guy's going to throw. But now you have an entire like biology lesson on how he throws those things and how he moves and all these things. I feel fortunate that at Sanford, I learned a lot about movement plots and those things, and how that affects, the hitter's view of pitches. So I had a little bit of a leg up on that, but it's been unbelievable. It's just been one Zoom per week so that you don't feel overloaded. And then all of our coordinators and everybody has been really accessible as far as just like, hey, do you feel behind on this? What do you need? And then you set up like a second meeting with them. It's been pretty cool.
Yeah, guys, I got a question for both of you. You know, we have a lot of those, you know, younger coaches are getting into the game, you know, and, you know, you hear a lot of the guys that they get into wanting to become coach. They want that head job really bad. What could you say about the process? I mean, for both of you guys have had, you know, different jobs at different times of your stages of your life, but you guys, from listening to you both in your process and where you're at, you know, both CJ and Jeff, you guys been patient about that. What kind of advice could you give for that, say, 20-year-old, you know, young, maybe mid 20s, young, you know, ambitious coach wanting to be the head guy at one point in his career?
So I'll say that there's a when I first started out coaching at Seattle University with Donnie Harrell, and that staff was awesome. Looking back on it, it was Donnie Harrell, Elliot Kribbe, Mike Nato, and Jeff James. And now Mike and Jeff are doing their thing at San Bernardino. They had an incredible year last year, went to the World Series. Elliot's now at Central Washington, and then Donnie's still kicking, right? Like doing his thing. And I was fortunate enough to be around these guys through the kind of rise of each of their careers. And I'll never forget mentioning money in the general vicinity of Coach Kribbe and him immediately kind of snatching me up and saying like, hey man, if money is ever a thought process early on in your career about this, like, this isn't for you. Like, this isn't for you. You're not for the players. You're not for the development of a program. You're not for it. Like, this is just not going to be for you, and you're not going to be for them. And I took that to heart. Like I think one of the reasons that Callie and I have worked so well together for years, and why he's one of my best friends, is I wanted to coach, and I was going to do whatever it took to coach, right? Like, I took a job blind out in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, because I wanted to experience something different right out of college, and was working part-time at a YMCA, opening up, you know, the facility at early morning hours, sending recruiting emails there. I would catch like a 10-minute nap in the bathroom. I legitimately like sleep on the floor in the bathroom with my hood up. It just put like the be right back thing on the desk just so I could catch up on sleep a little bit, and then drive my Chevy Malibu that had its alternator stolen out to Pittsburgh. And so I had to like kind of feather the gas a little bit in order to get it to like catch and just to go recruit. Right. And I never once was like, money's an issue, right? Like, I never once even thought about it. I said yes to everything I could do. I worked as hard as I could, and I knew that I would take any job possible in order to keep doing this thing that I love. Right. And then from there it's Bucknell, and you get the Division I job, and you're like super juiced about it. And okay, it pays like $7,500 on the year. So you got to figure out how to live with that. So I started bouncing, right. And started doing that, driving the same Chevy. And it really wasn't until my, you know, second year there when Calhoun and I talked about working and all that stuff. And I was like, shoot, I'm going to have benefits for the first time since I got off my parents' insurance thing. And he said that earlier, and it's no joke, right? Like you kind of, I was playing open gym basketball with all the coaches and stuff. And if I blew an ACL out, we were going to be walking around with that torn ACL for, you know, until I got insurance. Maybe you don't think about it. And so I would say my advice would be just, if you want to coach, you got to stick with it. And it's so easy to compare yourself, right? Like, comparison is the thief of joy. You start looking at other people that might be your same age and say, okay, they're ascending here, right? Like me, Calhoun, and Kelly are all in the same kind of bracket age group, right? And two of the three of us have been head coaches, and I have yet to reach that. And if I had used that as a marker for success, I wouldn't have loved what I did every single day. I wouldn't have found joy in being an assistant coach. I wouldn't have found joy in being a video tech and analytics coordinator at Stanford. I would have been like, well, the guys in my same class are head coaches now, or have had that experience. What am I doing? And so if you want to coach and figure out a way to do it, and just stay on your own path, because nobody's path is very rarely a straight line. Everybody kind of has the zigzags to get there. I know that Kel has had to mow fields and has had to do some gritty things in order to get to where he is. And I mean, Calhoun's got endless stories of doing stuff to get to where he is. So if you want to coach, you just got to stick with it. Don't worry about the money, and don't compare yourself to the other people that might be in your same age bracket, because it's just not. It's just going to kill it for you. That's what I've got to say. Sorry, that was my soapbox there.
Jason, I've told people for a long time, like, especially in recruiting when we work together, like trying to follow CJ up on stuff is miserable. But there's a couple things on CJ's comments. One, CJ, you went to Omaha, so like, what am I doing here? Like, what is this all worth?
Twice.
Like,
Went to Omaha twice.
Like CJ and I have talked about, like, for me, when I first started coaching, like my dream was to go to Omaha. Like that was my dream. I have a D2 one of those, like to go to Cary. Like it's pretty cool. It's on my nightstand. I look at it every night and cry about losing the national championship game every night. It's fine. But I think, like that, like I think, like I told CJ a long time ago when I first got into it, my goal as a coach was, like, my grandma lived in Omaha, and as a kid I had an opportunity to go to the College World Series with her, and I didn't go. And something came up and I couldn't make it. And I was going to drive out there with my dad and like have this experience with my grandmother. And then she passed like right after that. And so I never got to go to Omaha. And so that's always been an aspiration. It's like, hey, I'm never going to go, like, as much as I love CJ, like I'm not going to go watch the World Series. Like I wouldn't do it as a coach. I wouldn't do it as a fan. I just won't do it. The only time I'll ever go to Omaha is as a coach. And until then, that was the objective. And so, I like, that was my goal getting into it. And then I get my first job at Westmont College in Santa Barbara as an NAI program. And, I think there's a quote, my first coaching job was when I started working at Skagit Valley College. I coached linebackers at Newport High School in the fall of 2009. And Kelly, I don't think I ever told you this. So my high school football coach was the defensive coordinator there. And I came back from my first year of college and was trying to make some extra cash. He's like, hey, man, I can give you a couple $100, like, if you come help out with the linebackers, like outside of practice and like when you have days off, like come help out. I was like, all right, I'll do it. And I got into coaching when I got done with college baseball. I started coaching. And I came back, and every year when I'm in Washington for the holidays, I'll get coffee with him. And like he and I'll get 6 a.m. coffee. Dan Holden, he texted me when I got this job here with the Astros, and he's like, just the proudest person on the planet outside of my parents. And he told me this quote a long time ago, and I live by it. It's easy to make a buck, but it's hard to make a difference. And if you get in this, like CJ said, if you're in this and as a young coach, you're freaking out about money, like it ain't for you, man. And it sounds terrible. And I think I've said it before, like CJ said it, like I've done a bunch of odd jobs and done a bunch of random things to make this work and to continue to do this job and live out my career. But, it's easy to get caught up in like, man, I can go do construction, or I can go farm, or I can go, work marketing at T-Mobile, or I can go do something to make money. But if you're in the business of making a difference in kids' lives, like, and in a moment, it's hard to realize that because, like we were talking about earlier, it's like there's, I got Coach Ruiz telling people I'm making pennies an hour to players when he's running them. But it's those guys. I've been like, and I heard this from Pat Bailey, and Pat Bailey was one of my mentors when I first started. And Pat is still a really good friend to me and someone I look up to. And he, he always said, he's like, hey man, like you're judging your success off of wedding invitations and how many people want to bring their kids to meet you. And I was like, man, like that's a really deep thing to tell a 25-year-old kid. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And as my refrigerator here is completely full and I have to buy more magnets, which is frustrating. And CJ knows I'm a frugal human being. Like I'm having to buy more magnets because I got so many guys who are like, hey, like come to my wedding, come to my wedding, come to my wedding. Like I've made enough of an impact on them in the 3 years or 1 year or 2 years or wherever my stops have been that they want you there. And to them, when you show up and, I've been fortunate enough to have a decent amount of players become coaches that when they get into this profession, they ask me that question, like, hey, what would you tell me? And it's like, hey man, like I don't come from a ton of money. Like, it's not like I'm just sitting on a bunch of cash in my pocket and like, yeah, I can go make no money and be okay. Like, mommy and daddy are going to bail me out. Like, it was like, hey, like I want to do this and I want to make an impact. And it's like, no one's different than me. And no one's different than any of us as coaches that have made a bunch of sacrifices to do this. And that's where, again, I go back to that quote of like, it's so easy to make a buck, but it's really hard to make a difference because you can work your 9 to 5. And I said it to my family when I took this job this year. Like, I was with my parents when I was doing my interview process here with the Astros, and we're talking about the questions. I was talking about the questions with my parents after I interviewed, and they're like, this is who you are. Like, this is your career. Like, this is what you're built to do. Like, you were put on this planet to coach. Like, that's what you were put here to do. And the fact that you've ever thought about doing something else is disrespectful to people that have invested in you. And, you know, again, I think there's a lot of guys that, you know, Kelly knows them too. Like, there's guys that we got into this with when we first started that aren't doing it anymore, and guys that I truly love and care about. And it is a brotherhood. It is a culture. It is a family of coaches in the Northwest that, like, and it's hard because, like, when they get out, it is harder to keep up with them. And, you know, like, I'll be the first one to admit that with, like, you know, Nate Bobrowski's one of my closest friends in my 20s when I first started coaching. And, you know, Nate got out, got a bad deal on some stuff. And, you know, he's still making an impact on kids doing a different job, but it's like, you know, I'm not talking to him every 2 or 3 days like I do CJ or I do Kelly or I do other guys that I'm friends with like Kevin Koppel. Like, it's just like if you can survive those first couple of years, like, there's people that one, respect you for doing it, and two, that'll be in your corner for life. And it's, you know, I feel like we've taken a really dark turn on this siege, like, in regards to like the reactions on this camera. But like, I think it's like, again, like, it's a family. And you know, I joked about it in my interview. I was like, yeah, I'm part of the Northwest Mafia. Like, that's my thing. Like, I'm part of it. And either you want to have them in you either want the Mafia in your system or you don't. Like, it's up to you. So, like, now hit the Godfather, like, background music while transition. Da, 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 da.
No, and I think you guys hit on a lot of it too. I mean, especially that young coach thing, because it's a great question from Jason. But like, it's so weird how not a straight line our profession is. Like, you go to, and I think we've probably talked about this before, but if you go work in a factory, you're the greeter, you're the machine guy, you're the this, you're the that, you're the manager, you're the boss, you're the CEO, whatever. Like, that's just kind of how things work, right? You put your time in it and it happens. And that's just not the deal for us, right? I think there's always other opportunities. You always have to know someone, something has to open up and something has to work in your favor. But the inevitable is like, you're always thinking about, you know, well, is this a good opportunity? Should I do this? And you got people in your corner that you're kind of asking about different things. It's not that we all like don't like where we're at, right? But and I know there's some loyalty that goes into that. I mean, you look at college football alone right now, how that thing has changed. Like, baseball is not like that right now. But I think inevitably, like, we're always kind of looking. And I think the tough part to get into, especially younger, was, you know, something opens up and you kind of get your hopes up, right? Oh shoot, I should go do that. Like, that would be a good job. I know that person there, and it doesn't work out. Like, I think that we probably all in this room have had, you know, 10, 20, 50, 100 different opportunities that we thought about that ended up just not ended up working out. So you are where you are, right? You are where your feet are, and you go about that. But talk about that for you guys. I mean, I know you've been to a few different places, but how do you guys manage those thoughts in your head about, like, opportunities open up and trying to picture yourself in that role, not sure the angle to go to take it, but you don't have to name names of specific places, but talk about kind of some of that thought process in your guys' head in the past.
Hey, real quick, I'll take this one first. CJ, would you say that's kind of similar to how, like, Chuck E. Cheese works with, like, You work your way up.
Yeah, from my experience being a ball pit lifeguard, working my way up to the animatronic band mechanic, to the top ticket taker in the Northeast, all the way up to being the manager at Charles Entertainment Industries. Yeah, it's very, very similar. Very similar. There's a great background story to that. I'll tell you guys off the record.
CJ, as soon as I started hearing like factory, like greeter, I was like, man, like, I think CJ would really understand like what these guys are talking about. But no, I think, it's that classic saying like, hey, the grass is green where you water it. You know what I mean? And I think, I've said it before. I think loyalty, like you're as loyal as you are to take care of yourself and your family. Like, you know what I mean? And I think that's where, like CJ said it earlier, it's like, he called me about the opportunity at Stanford when he was working with me. And I was like, dude, like what you're going to get paid and like the opportunity you're getting to work at a place that, we've both worked camp there for years. Like we've hustled to do this for a long time. And like, as and I think that's where it comes into play, like phone calls of like, hey, this isn't your head coach talking, this is your friend. Like if we were flipping roles, I'm doing it. And, it's just the honesty factor to it. And I think that's where it's like, I told people for a long time, like, and I've said it still to this day, like who you hook your card up to means a lot. And I've been really fortunate to have hooked my card up to really great people in my career, of like Robert Ruiz, who's now the athletic director at Westmont, to Eric Newman, who UC San Diego won the Big West last year, even though they were playoff ineligible, to Justin James, and then to being the guy that the card gets hooked up to. And I think that's where, for me at Biola too, like, loyalty, like you're saying, Kelly, like I called Justin at Point Loma and was like, hey man, I don't think I'm going to take this job. Like, I don't think I'm going to be the head coach at Biola. And, I went and, hand of God is a faith-based man. Like hand of God kind of played on that one. Like I had to go. I didn't live in the greatest neighborhood in San Diego, so any of my Amazon packages got delivered to UC San Diego's Amazon Dropbox. And so I drove to campus to pick up some pens for recruiting, actually. And I drive by and I'm like, I wonder if Eric's here. I wonder if Coach Newman's here. And sure enough, his car was there, which in the summer, all the guys that listen to this podcast that are San Diego guys, like, no, like Coach Newman's got 5 kids, man. Like he ain't in the office unless there's something going on. And otherwise he's out recruiting. He's out doing other things. Like he's out being a dad. And I drive in and his car's there. And I was like, dude, okay, I'm going to go talk to him because I just got offered this job. Drive in, walk in the door. He's like, hey, close the door, sit down. We're going to talk about this. And, like he's been like CJ talked about earlier about like there's certain people that when they talk, you listen. For me, Eric Newman's one of those guys. And he made a great comment that was like, as a faith-based man, like you can't be afraid of walking into a room that's dark and being afraid of the boogeyman. And like you got to be able to turn the light on and figure out what's in there. And that was for me becoming a head coach. And I think kind of like Jason, you were asking about being a head coach as a young guy. It was like you don't know what you don't know until you get there. And it was like, yeah, I think I'm going to stay at Point Loma. And he's like, buddy, you're going to have to explain to every person when you interview for a job from here till eternity why you didn't take a head coaching job when you were offered it. So, like, why would anybody hire you for an assistant job when you've turned down a head job? And I was like, man, like that's a real comment. And that's a real business decision here. And I think similar to CJ with the Astros, man, like there were times for me in the process, I was like, what am I talking about? Like I'm not, professional coaches are on this level. And for me, it's like being a Northwest guy. It's like, man, like it's Craig Driver, it's Tanner Swanson, it's Kai Correa, it's Billy Boyer. Like they're in this category to me of human beings and people that that's not where I fit. And, again, like talking about the call here, it's like, I called CJ and I was like, man, like, I don't know. Like I was sitting with my parents, I was like, and he brought up again, like the nostalgia idea of like your locker's going to have your jersey with your name in it. And I was like, that's wild. Like, that's not something I could have ever imagined when I was cleaning toilets at Westmont College. Like, not a chance in 2014 that I would be doing this. And that was, I think like it's so easy to look at everybody else. And like CJ said earlier, like comparison is so poor for your career path. And it's like, it's so easy to compare and it's so easy. But like the thing that changes everything is your work ethic and the time you put into how great can I make where I am. And if you focus on that, like, and again, there's going to be challenges at every place you go. And I think I'm not going to put words in CJ's mouth, but like working at Division I, just because you're working at Division I doesn't mean there's obstacles and challenges at your place. And it's like, how do we make the place that I'm at the best I can make it? And how can I make, again, like going back to the players being the priority? Because if we don't have players, we don't have a job. And for me, I got told this by a guy who passed away last year. He was the head coach at a junior college in Illinois and then was the AD at Tyler Junior College in Texas. He was the AD of the year he passed. Was your coach, you are impacting somebody's glory days. And that for me is something that like I never take for granted. Is like, hey man, like how do I like, yeah, I'm not a big celebrate a home run guy and like pimp home runs, but in college, like here at Campbell, when I worked here, man, those dudes love to pimp home runs with first base coaches. So it's like, hey, like, okay, like I'm going to be in on it. I'm going to do it because like for them, like these are moments that they will remember forever. And like, how am I a part of that and encouraging them to be able to come back a year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road and be like, man, like I remember these moments. Like that's where, again, like nostalgia comes into play of like, it's so easy to look at like, what if, and I should have done this and maybe I should have done that. It's like, but the moments you have at the places you have, like that's who makes you. And yeah, that's my long-winded answer, CJ. So follow that up.
So basically I think about it as far as other opportunities and everything comes up. You know, my dad always says that life is what happens when you're making other plans, right? We get into coaching for one reason or another. And I think for me, initially there was just this massive amount of ego, right? I had a little bit of insecurity because I just was a very average to below average college player with a very forgettable career at a very forgettable college, right? And and instead of looking at it and being grateful for the experiences that I got to have that, you know, not a lot of people do get to have, I kind of looked at it as, again, my friends did this and people in my circle did this, and I've got to figure out a way to surpass that. And so the mission originally was get to Division I, and I got there. And for me, the fit was so, but then once getting there, I realized like, hey, family is so very important to me. So I'd rather be a 2-hour flight away from home than, in case anything were to ever happen, than be a 5-hour flight away from home. And so then, I look at it years later, and it's kind of funny. You don't want to ever give your players or when you're at the high school or college level, you don't ever want to give those guys advice that you wouldn't give yourself. Right. And one of the biggest pieces of advice that I'd give when I'd stand up there at like camps or whatever, and look at high schoolers, and I would tell them, wearing the Stanford logo, and I'd tell them, hey, fit should surpass anything, right? Like that should be the thing that matters the most, because you can be in Simpson University, where I went to school, or you could be standing on the field in Omaha, and at the end of the day, the cameras just make things look cooler, but baseball is baseball in between the white lines, and fit is everything. And I kind of look back on that, and I'm like, man, fit really is like the most important thing. And so while these opportunities might look great, I think it's really important to keep in mind, fit is so very important. And I've told Callie before that if I don't get the Biola job, I don't know that I'm still in coaching. Like I really don't know that I am. It reinvigorated my love for the game, the love for coaching and just being around players and everything. And I was fortunate enough to move on from there and feel like I've been following my own advice for the first time in years. The last 5 years I've been doing this thing. So I just would say that I think that yeah, to answer that, like fit is just got to be like the most important thing for you.
Yeah, I think that relationship aspect is so important. I mean, Jeff, you to hit it spot on the head. About you really got to tag the right car that you're going to tug along with, right? I mean, you become like those you associate with, and if you associate with the right people, they're going to get you the right direction. And so, I want to follow up with a question of how important is the goal aspect? We all talk about year end, we read out our own personal goals, but as coaches, we really haven't really spoke on much about this. But writing out those personal coaching goals, and actually, people always say, "Well, I got goals." Do you really have goals? A goal is, in my book, is something is written on paper, right? Something you can visually see. It's not really a goal until it's put on paper, because initially you can always have thoughts, and your thoughts can always draw you to the left, to the right, but a goal written on paper is always going to keep you moving straight ahead. So how important was it for both of you guys to have those goals? I know, Jeff, you kind of brought that up a few different times, but having those goals, I mean, when I first got into coaching, I became really good friends with Kim Cox from DeSales, and Kim was real big on that. And he had told me, when I got into DeSales, my goal was in 5 years of taking over this program, we're going to have these guys state bound. And so, I took upon myself, and that was it. I wanted that same vision, that same drive. And so by year 3, we made a state appearance. And so, but, just setting those things every year in, year out, how important were those for you guys?
Yeah, I think that goal setting is massively important, especially because a lot of coaching isn't super sexy, right? There's a lot of things that you have to do that don't involve hitting a fungo and throwing BP and talking with your players and bantering with them, right? Like there's so much more than that. And I kind of like look back at when I was at Seattle U, the best time ever to be a coach is when you're a grad student, because everybody in the coaching world is willing to help you out, right? Like I sent a blind email to Monty Lee his first year of getting the job at Clemson and was like, "Hey, congrats, been following you. I'm a grad student, whatever." It's just blind email, right? It was part of a group project thing. And he sent me a cell phone number within 5 minutes of the email, because everybody wants to help that person out. And so I started reaching out to more coaches, and I got a one-on-one with Heather Tarr at UW. And I went to the facility, and she and I sat down, and she tells me this incredible story about her interview process and how she pretty much had said, "Hey, this is my plan. These are my goals. This is how we're going to get to a national championship. And by year 4, I will bring a national championship to the University of Washington." She gets this job by kind of like luck, right? There was other applicants and people with bigger names and whatever at the time than her. She gets this job, and what does she do? Year 4, hits this thing on the head, right? So that solidifies it for me. I was eyes wide open. I'm like, all right, I'm going to hit these goals. I'm going to get here by this time. And Omaha, similar to what Callie had said, was a place that was sacred for me, and I wasn't going to go until I was a part of a staff that was going. And I had that set in my Heather Tarr 4-year plan of we're going to get to Omaha for the second I reached Division I baseball, and I got to Bucknell, and it wasn't in the cards for that level of play, and it took some time, but those goals that I had set were part of the reason that I kept pushing forward, right? Like in those days where you're doing things that you're counting baseballs because your head coach is like, "Hey, I need to know how many all-weather balls we have," and you're like, "What? Why does that even matter? We have 152," and he's like, "Nah, I counted myself and it was 153," and you're like, "Why did I count that?"
That wasn't me. That wasn't me. As a former
jerk.
employer of CJ Baker. Not me. That was not me.
We had 154 at Biola.
166. It's no big deal. Whatever, Kelly. Like, calm down.
But
I'm jealous.
but those days where you're doing things especially as an assistant and kind of fresh in it, where you're like, I've got friends that are making their way up the Boeing ladder right now who've had 2 master's degrees paid for. What am I doing with myself? And then you kind of are able to look at these hard set goals for yourself. Where you're like, you know what? The more ambitious version of myself when I first started That's what I got to get back to. It's really important, I think, to have those things set up for yourself, especially as kind of like your bumpers in a bowling alley, right? Where the ball's just kind of heading a little bit, you're heading a little bit more towards the gutters, and you're like, maybe coaching is not for me. And you're able to look back at that and be like, all right, I'm actually taking some steps forwards toward this thing. And you hit your bumpers and you head straight for the pins from there. And whether you knock them all down at once or you knock one down at a time until you get to that place that you want to be, I think it's really important. Good luck, Callie.
That's what I told myself every time you talk to a recruit on a visit, and it's like, let's look at the head coach now. And it's like, yeah, so what do you
Same.
want? Yeah, ditto.
This is how much money you'll get.
Yeah, here's your scholarship. CJ says you're a good player. Like, so, if you're not, I'm firing CJ. So it's fine. Like, the real reason you went to Stanford comes out. So anyway, no, I think, oh man, no, I think, like, gosh dang it, now I'm just being a jackwagon. Can you repeat the question, because I'm slow-minded?
Yeah.
And CJ just
Maybe,
killed it. So
maybe CJ, you can help out with this a little bit. You know, I mean, you let off really well. So
yeah, CJ, you crushed it. So tell me what the question is, CJ.
Do my job for me again, like the past.
Count all weather balls for me like you did in the past.
Basically short walk for a short drink of water. How important is goal setting as you get into your coaching career?
Yeah, guys, you gotta remember it's 11:30 out here. Like, some of us wake
That's
up at
right.
4 a.m. to work out. Okay, so it's like it's kind of a big deal here that you guys are keeping me up this late.
Side note: now that you've been out there, how bad is it for playoff football to be on the East Coast?
Oh, yeah.
It's the worst.
The worst. It's the worst. You know, like the Bills game, I was up so late. And CJ, you know me, like early to bed, early to rise. Like, I love sleep, but like I'm gonna go to bed early. I'm not a late night guy. Like, you and the guys at the house would like, hey, we're watching a movie. It's like, all right, cool, I'm going to bed. Like, whatever. Like, I'm going to go to bed. Like, now it's like, all right, like, football's on. Got to watch till 11:45, and Taylor Swift wins. So I got to stay up that late.
Well, that Bills game was early. That Bills game was done at like 9:30 your time, old man.
It felt like 11:45.
It was a 6 o'clock start.
Well, yeah, like last week, but the week before.
Oh, okay. Mr. Taylor Swift chatter in here.
Over the fact that I forgot his question. So like, and he's gone.
You
so
lost him at Swifty.
We lost him.
Yeah.
No, he got mad that I forgot his question. It's fine. So no, I think from a goal setting standpoint, and CJ is getting up and leaving too, so it's fine.
Losing the crowd.
Yeah, losing the crowd here. It's getting late on the West Coast too, fellas. So I think no, like again, goal setting is important because again, if you don't have something to achieve, like you're never going to have success. So like for me, like even like in the Division II level, when I was an assistant coach or even as a head coach, I was like, hey, like we want to go to Cary, like we want to go to North Carolina, we want to go to the World Series. Like that was always a goal. And you know, it's the classic line of like, if you shoot for the moon, you'll land on the stars. Mm-hmm. And thanks, Jason. I'm back. Like, I'm glad you're here. So anyway, so like, I already finished my answer. So like, thanks for
answer
coming.
The question, jerk.
Like, yeah, right. So, I wonder who said that with his hat, not backwards this time. But anyway, I think for us, like, again, I think at the end of the day, like you want to shoot for the moon. So for even like the day I got the job at Biola, I called every guy and was like, hey, like, here's what I'm going to do for you. Like, I'm going to love you and I'm going to work my tail off for you. But I want to go to the World Series. Like, and there was a goal in place. And there was a goal in place when I worked at UC San Diego as an assistant coach and working for Eric Newman. Like, that was always the objective. And when we made it, like, it wasn't a surprise versus – if you say like, hey, our goal is to go 500 and you exceed that, then it's like, well, now what do we do? Like we've been like our goal plane has been for this and we've exceeded our goal. Now what do we do? Like, you know, and again, I think I've been a big fan of watching, Dan Campbell and watching the Lions right now, and like watching his progression. And I love Dan Campbell. I've loved Dan Campbell,
Absolutely.
and my dad and I watch like there's a YouTube series that like comes out when he first gets the job of him talking about the draft and watching him and the GM work through the draft. And it's like Inside the Den, I think it's called on YouTube. And it's like watching them go through that process as first time GM, first time head coach. And like just seeing like, hey, from day one, it's been like, hey, we're going to win a Super Bowl. And like watching his interview, even like, or listening to his post game speech from Saturday, it was like, hey, man, like, it, like, we knew, like, hey, or Sunday, like, we knew, hey, congrats on winning the game. That's awesome. We got 2 more to go. And it's not like, hey, let's win next week. Let's win this one. Let's win this one. It's like, no. We've said from day one that we're going to win the Super Bowl. We need to win 2 games. How do we do that? And so I think that's where it's like goal setting is important, and like your success for your team and success for yourself. Like, again, like my goals were get full-time insurance and get to Omaha. Those have been my 2 goals from day one. And now, like, my goal is to help a guy get to the major leagues and help a guy win a World Series. Like, how do I help the Houston Astros win a World Series? Like, that's my job. And going to the meetings and being around the coordinators and talking to a lot of people, like, Kelly can knock it off over there. That's enough. But like, I think again, like, how do we do that? Like, there's a lot of different things to do that. And that's even me right now, like going over goals, like working with our outfield coordinator, Dylan Nazzo, because part of my responsibility is helping outfielders create their goals in low A. Like, how do I make sure that they're able to, like, here's your goals. How do we achieve them? How do we do our drill work to get there? Like, maybe that outfielder makes a difference in 2 years from now for us to win the World Series. And it's like not being so caught up in the short term, but allowing our long-term goals to lead us to success. And, something that, I'm in the guest room in my house, and there's I call it my office usually, and we have people stay here like off and on when they come out and watch games and stuff. But my dad wrote this on the board, and I'm going to show you guys it real quick. My dad wrote this, which is dream bigger. And that's always been, like, he wrote that. And, like, CJ knows my dad. My dad's the most positive human being on the planet.
The best.
Like, blue-collar dude from Iowa. Like, dad was a door-to-door salesman. Like, just blue-collar people. And that was something that, like, for me, like, he wrote that up there probably in May when they got here for our playoff run. And I haven't taken it down. And that's something that, like, I just always am like, man, like, that's the epitome of what I went through this offseason trying to figure out with this job. Like, hey, like, how big can you dream? And that was something with the Astros that was really exciting, was just like the plan that they had in place for me was like, man, like, I'm not a big 3 to 5 year guy, but like, where do you guys see me in 3 to 5 years? And they told me, and I was like, man, like, okay, like, that's something I could dream about. And like, that's something that I've never thought about being in a big league dugout. Like, that's a potential option. Like, yeah, like, I'm in. Like, let's